he mentioned, and I don't know if anybody else caught it, but he said that life is empty and meaningless. And that's a level of listening. Ahmed was talking about, when you meet somebody, you got 1, 2, 3, 4 going on in your head, and it's not the actual of what the person even said. But that level of listening, of coming to the individual, coming to the conversation with nothing, anything then is possible. Okay? And it's really a level of listening, or the space that you come into the conversation with empty and meaningless. And then, from that, of course, anything is possible.
Well, as an industrial engineer, one of the things we work on is project management and leadership development. And one thing that's interesting, one thing that I really pulled away from that was that a leader is not simply someone who's there and appointed to that position. And I'm going to build off of a point that me and Zaha Al-Fanti, I believe, were discussing earlier. He said it's someone who gets people to follow them because they stand for something, because they're there to represent something, because they have certain qualities that make them a leader and that distinguish them from the people around them. And that trust that people put into that one leader that's there, that's what makes a difference. And that's why we give them the choice to make an executive decision. The whole process of listening is for that leader to be able to take in and to recognize threats or weaknesses within their group, or threats and weaknesses that may oppose their people, or threats and weaknesses that oppose the ideas that they represent. And then for them to be able to recognize that and to listen and then to respond, the fact that all those people trust them is what makes them a leader. It's not necessarily just the title.
Thank you. Yes?
I think if we have to define this communication and listening, it has to be attentive listening on both sides of the conversation. Because if you go into a meeting and you say, I would like to hear today, I listen to you, tell me about your concern, what you want to tell me, and you actually listen and acknowledge that you are actually listening by, give them some cues.
Yes.
That's one. Because then if you listen to them, they will listen to you.
Yes.
But if you go every time and you just want to be the speaker and they're the listeners, then they get bored and they say, okay, here he comes again, he wants to talk about it.
Yes,
So
and
it has to be both.
Exactly.
That's why a lot of times when you talk to somebody, oh yeah, I hear you. When they say I hear you, that means I'm not listening to you. You're bothering me. So they make it very clear. If somebody's not listening, can you tell? Sometimes, if you cannot tell, they'll tell you. Yeah, I hear you.
And it works the other way too. A lot of you mentioned, it's not, you don't just listen. If you go to someone and you start a conversation where they're doing all the talking and there's no reaction from you, they're going to stop talking to you. They're not going to enjoy the conversation. It's about give and take, but when somebody is talking, you pay attention to what they're saying, and then you respond just like what you were saying. Yes?
The leader, you let the team feel like they're doing the work, whereas the leader, you are the one that's navigating the direction. For example, from my experience is that when we have a meeting, I will say, okay, I'll send the email and saying, I want this is the agenda, I want you to put the topics, what we're going to, so I make the team to actually put the topics that we're going to discuss. And then, but I set the time, how long the topic is going to be discussed. And then we discuss it on the team. So that way, everybody gets their input and also they're the ones creating the environment.
Kind of like a facilitator, right?
Right.
Yeah.
That's basically it.
Yes, yes.
Do you think there's two kinds of leaders in this society? A leader by position, which is you have to listen to them because they have the position. And the leader by created, a leader by natural. This is who's given to the world. I have to listen to you. But by position, I'm just, protect my interests. I don't think so. That the best leader who has the position, how he moving from the position to be a natural leader.
Exactly. There's a book by Robin Sharma. It's called The Leader Who Has No Title. Robin Sharma is the number 2 leadership expert in the world. And his book, The Leader Who Has No Title, talks about what you're talking about. It's a great book. All right, so I want to invite you guys to be interested in other people. And the way to do that, I always say, develop an attitude of curiosity. Look at it this way. Every single time you meet a person, that person has a story. They have a life, they have a family, they have work. They have so many things that they can share with you. And if you walk in and meet that person and you have that attitude of, I want to know, I'm really genuinely interested in this other person, you would create amazing relationships. So for some reason, I realized when I got here is that I had like 2 examples about USA presidents. It's not intentional. It's just the stories that I found to emphasize my points. But Bill Clinton was a very powerful president, and one of the things that he was known for is he had an amazing listening skills. He was really, really, like, it was told that when you're talking to him, no matter who you are, whether you're a janitor to like a CEO, he gave you 100% of his attention. It was like nobody else was in the room. It was told that, when he's talking to you, he would not break eye contact with you to even reach to a glass of water. He would be doing this. No, he would not break eye contact. And a lot of people, they say that he's an amazing person to speak to because he makes you feel like you're the most important person in the room. So, any questions? Yes.
Well, in psychology, they're teaching us that listening and being interested in your patient or client.
Okay.
They say when you first meet your client, pretend that you're in love with that person, and that's your first date, and you just want to absorb everything they're telling you and be there for them 100%, body, mind, and ears, and eyes, and everything. It's just sitting there trying to absorb everything they're telling you. That's not a question, that's a statement.
No, it's an excellent point, I agree. Any questions? Yes.
Just a scenario.
Okay.
You're in a conversation with someone and you perhaps have those listening skills and the other person doesn't. How would you portray that to get them to actually listen or to hear you? And if they're not naturally like that, what are some suggestions?
Honestly, I think, from my experience, I would listen to them, and then when I start talking, when I start, pointing out if they're not listening, I would say, oh, would you mind, giving me a minute to explain my point to you, so you can understand what I'm trying to say. So I think it's hard to control the other person's behavior, and sometimes if you try to give them instruction, they might shut you down. So I think you just do your best, you just listen to them. You try to say something like, oh, can I finish my point? I just want to make sure we're clear, we're on the same page. And then, you can't really, I'm sure there are ways, but not that I'm aware of. That's what I usually do. Is that helpful? Yes.
If you're talking to somebody who's not listening to you, stop talking.
Some people are just like,
No, stop
hear
talking.
themselves.
Yeah, stop talking first,
Uh-huh.
and then say, are you ready now?
Okay.
Make sure that
Make it a point.
if they're standing up, they have a seat. Make sure that first of all they're willing to listen. Once you give them if they start getting to do something else or opening a different subject, you say, just stop. Let's go back to the subject. That's the only way.
Yeah. Anybody else has any suggestions to her point, her question? Do you have a suggestion for her?
I do. People take in information differently. So if somebody's not a good listener, then try presenting the information in a different way. Try providing them with visuals, with something else, because not everybody can understand information the best way.
Definitely.
Through listening.
Definitely.
It's always good to ask them, do you want to hear this? Are you interested in the information? We can change the topic.
Listening is a skill. So not everybody has that type of skills.
Exactly.
You want to talk to me or not?
And the thing that's important to point out is, the other person, it's very important not to take it personally because the other person is probably unaware of what they're doing. Some people they just don't realize that they're talking all the time. So it's about, not taking it personally and, maybe they're not as blessed as you are. They don't have the listening skill that you have. And
I feel like your best friend, but there's just some people that just love to keep on going. That's not their intention. But my question is pretty much, how do you
deal with
get
it?
them to focus on it's a two-way conversation?
For me, like I said, I would say something like, can you give me a minute? Like, I just want to make sure we're on the same page, we understand each other, and, sometimes, no matter what you do, it won't work, but you try your best, and that's all you can do.
Try to keep the eye contact level. Try to keep the eye contact, and I think visual. And body language will explain more.
I think
Than just talking to
You're not.
talk with the
Yes.
person. And talking to the person.
Therefore, they have something that would actually tangible, and they can see it. So that would be a recommendation.
Okay. Yes, you had a point to make?
You want to go first?
I mean, different people's brains work differently, and for some people, listening and engaging in a conversation is a lifelong learning skill. So we have to just be aware and more accepting that our strengths may not be somebody else's strengths. And I think that level of acceptance will have your frustration rate down, and I think, again, modality, like you said, write an email, follow up with an email, like any other visuals, PowerPoint presentation, any other.
I like your point. One of the things that I learned at my job is sometimes we go to meetings and we present information, but the client might not be paying attention to what we're saying. So what we do is we go back to the work and we type down like the notes. Here's the notes of the email. Please take a look at it. If you disagree with something, please let us know. And if a month down the road they're like, oh, we never said that. That's just said, oh, here's the email. So it's good in the business situation.
Sometimes they're not good listeners because of the lack of the knowledge.
Exactly. They're not as blessed as.
I don't know what they talk about, you know.
Yes.
There's another very good book, is The Seven Habits of the Highly Effective.
Very good book.
Stephen Covey.
Yes.
This is 8 now.
It's an excellent book. Yes.
I think we are missing one important issue about being of a different culture when we assess people ability or people or their body expression. How when we talk to them, sometimes if they look down, we cannot assume they are not listening to us. It could be that's their culture.
Yes.
So that's why I
Absolutely.
think I want to go back to the point that Mr. Jalil was making, that about those scholars or writers, when they talk about one culture, we cannot generalize that study to our own culture because we have our own background, our understanding, our religion, so.
Especially the eye contact.
Yeah, especially.
I agree. Like if you're talking.
Yeah, from my experience, I used to be a case manager, and sometimes when I have a female client, I wouldn't be able to
Exactly.
treat her like I'd be treating a male client. So.
I agree with you. Yeah, of course you have to consider cultural differences. Definitely. One more question and then we're done. I haven't heard you, so.
Okay, so I think it was mentioned that listening is a natural skill, and I think it's true. Some people are blessed, as you said, with that ability, but I think we can also work with others to develop that.
Exactly.
One of the things that I learned once in an elementary classroom was when the teacher said, "Give me 3," which means stop what you're doing, stop talking, and look up at me. So that works with elementary school students. So it depends really on who we're talking to. If it's an adult, usually I'll say something like, give me a chance to explain, then let me know if you agree with what I'm saying. Obviously you agree with what you're going to say. Listen to me and let's see if you agree with what I have to say. So I think you can hear people to.
Yes, of course. It's a skill that you can develop. Humans can develop any skills if they put the effort. Thank you for sharing. So thank you, everybody. Okay, well, we got a couple more minutes. Anybody wants to share something? Yes.
I think the question was about listening and not understanding. Because if you are talking to somebody and you feel like you lost them or they lost you, you keep checking them. Say, you know what I'm saying now? Okay, what do you think? Make sure that you get them engaged. Because if they can give you some kind of a feedback, you know they're listening. Because if you talk to them for half an hour, they don't understand anything, you send them an email, you send them an email of something that they have no idea what you're talking about. That means because we have listening can be, it's like comprehension. If a person cannot understand what you're talking to them because of lack of knowledge, they don't have a reference of information, then even when you send it to them, still agree. They still want to understand.
Yeah.
So what you have to do, because remember when you talk to the kid, listen, here, make sure they look at you like Lisa said. Because listening is an active participation in a conversation.
Yes.
If a person is not actively listening, then you lost them. Sending them a memo is a confirmation of what was said.
I
So
think
we have to teach the skill. And what I found is helpful is I go with the person, I go from what they call the known to the unknown. What do you know so far? And we continue now. If you know they're not following you with the first steps,